Here at Stories of Hope, Kerry Atherton's mission is to give people a platform to share their stories of hope with the world. We also want to provide the same chance to businesses that are passionate about mental health and want to support the podcast. If you'd like to partner with Stories of Hope and advertise your services on this podcast, send a message to kerry@empowerlifesolutions.com.au with your details. Now, on with the episode. In times of trauma and adversity, we must create space for connection by sharing a story of hope. Welcome to Stories of Hope Worldwide, hosted by Kerry Atherton. This podcast shares inspiring stories of individuals who have faced significant challenges and emerged stronger, offering hope and resilience to listeners all over the world. Join Kerry, the founder of Stories of Hope, every week to hear these remarkable journeys and find strength to overcome your adversity. Now, let's listen in to this week's conversation.
Welcome to another episode of Stories of Hope Worldwide. I'm Kerry Atherton and I'm your host, and today's guest is Donna Thistlethwaite. Donna is the survivor of a suicide attempt when she jumped from Brisbane's Story Bridge. She's got an amazing tale of survival, and today she works in the mental health space, empowering individuals and organisations with positive mental health. Welcome, Donna.
Oh, thank you, Kerry. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
It's so great to have you on today, and we go back a long way. We've been very fortunate enough to have you share in person at our events and to have your story in our Stories of Hope book.
Yeah.
Many of our supporters out there are big fans of your story, but there's many who haven't heard it and will be really, really empowered by what you're going to share today. Donna, let's start by talking about the wonderful work that you're doing today, which was a purpose born out of the pain that you were in.
Yeah, absolutely, Kerry. So, I think for the last 6 or 7 years, I have been speaking and training on mental health. I had my story featured on an episode of Australian Story, and then that led to organisations asking me to come and speak at their company and even at their town. And so I did a bit of a regional tour, speaking at like AIR in North Queensland. And so it really just created this new pathway for me of speaking and training on mental health. So I am a mental health first aid instructor, and I run a host of programs that help to create mentally healthier workplaces.
Wow, yes. So you're doing some great work out there. That's really amazing. And I know many, many people and organisations that have greatly benefited from your knowledge and your life story. So I've heard your story a few times, but can you take us all back, for those who haven't heard it before, to that time in your life where things did start to spiral and the lead up to you making that decision on that fateful day to jump from Brisbane Story Bridge?
Sure, Kerry. So at the time, I was a human resource management professional working in a corporate environment and had lots of friends and family, had been with the organisation 16 and a half years. I was working part-time because I had a child, a toddler at home. And so I was transitioning, working part-time, but I was involved with a change project that the organisation was undertaking. And I found myself in a situation where I had an argument with this young woman who worked for me, and it wasn't something I'd ever had happen before. I generally got on really well with people, and it actually triggered a crisis of confidence for me. It set off a chain reaction where I just had all this self-doubt come up, and all my old stories of you're not good enough and you don't know what you're doing all sort of just came up for me and became the lens that I sort of interpreted what came after that. I thought that I'd resolved lots of that stuff. Like many people, I have some childhood trauma, but I'd had therapy and I thought I'd put that to bed, but it sort of resurfaced and really caused an unraveling for me at work and personally.
Donna, was that conflict something where your expertise were being questioned?
It was a stand-up argument in the office where
Right.
someone refused to do what I'd asked them to do. And I guess it was like a questioning of my expertise. I was a relatively new leader in the business,
Yeah.
and I had been coaching managers on how to be better leaders for a
Right.
decade before that. And I suddenly thought, well, who am I to know when clearly I'm not a great leader because this situation is occurring?
So they really challenged your authority.
Yes, and I
Right.
think they were a younger person, and I think I was from like an older school style philosophy where you didn't generally question leadership,
Yeah.
although I can certainly appreciate that that's necessary as well. But it's how do we do that in a safe environment? And I would like to think all this time on that I would react differently to that situation. But certainly at the time, with my history and where I was on my journey, I actually didn't respond well and it caused quite a few problems for me.
Yeah. And as you will share shortly, and you've shared with me, hindsight's a great thing, isn't it? Because you can look back now and see that where things had started to unravel and where the cracks were starting to appear.
Absolutely.
And so it was only a short few weeks after that, wasn't it, that
Yeah,
you said your mental health deteriorated pretty rapidly?
absolutely, Kerry. I think that's one of the biggest sort of shocks around all of this. I would say it was 7 to 10 days between when that incident happened and I started to struggle to when I actually made a decision that I'd messed everything up and I couldn't see a way forward. And it felt like the only way I could deal with the situation or get out of the situation was to not be around anymore.
When you say you had that sense that you'd messed everything up and you couldn't come back from that, what exactly are you referring to that you messed up?
I felt like I was failing at work.
Okay.
So I sort of started to have those negative thoughts come up. I remember leaving meetings and hearing the voice in my head say, they know you don't know what you're doing. They know you've got no idea. They know you're failing. And this would have been a great time to reach out to somebody and let them know what was going on. And I certainly would give that advice to anybody finding themselves struggling mentally. But I thought to do that would be broadcasting that I was a failure. And so I just tried to deal with it myself. Yeah, I just felt like I'd made a mess of things and I didn't want to continue in the job anymore. And I felt like I couldn't find a way forward. I thought I was going to get the sack, to be honest.
Oh, right.
Thought I
Wow.
was going to lose my job. And I'd invested a lot of time and energy and even money, I guess, into my career. And it was quite important to me.
And things have really come a long way now, haven't they, in the mental health field and with the awareness in workplaces and things like that. Back then, I'm sure we just had, the employment assistance programs, but there really wasn't that real awareness about mental health in the workplace and what to do when you were struggling.
No, I think we've definitely made some great progress. Not all organizations, but certainly as a society and in many workplaces, there's significant progress.
And I know that you've worked hard to make that happen, and that's been very much part of the model of your work.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fueled my passion for others not having to walk that path and people understanding that everything is temporary and we just need to hang in there because it will inevitably change.
Yes, I love that. Donna, can you take us back to that day and what followed after that?
Sure, Kerry. So I my partner was away when these challenges at work were occurring and he hadn't really ever gone away on a boys' trip before. And I didn't want to spoil that by telling him that I was struggling.
Right.
He did sense that something was going on, and he came home a day early. So he was due back on the Saturday. He came home on the Friday. I told him what was going on, and it just all felt really real and a big mess. And I really honestly thought I was going to get sacked from work. And that night when I went to bed, I couldn't sleep. I had lots of thoughts about the situation and had started to think that maybe ending my life was the only way forward. Then Saturday, quite similar experience with sleep. And then when I woke up on Sunday morning, I had made a decision. And that was, well, to end my life. It wasn't to make an attempt on my life. It was to end my life. And that afternoon, I decided to go to the bridge, to plan to return later that evening. Now, thankfully, there are great big fences on that bridge now. That was one of the best days of my life when they put those barriers up.
Yeah.
Because accessibility is part of the problem, part of the reason that people complete suicide. And so, if there's one less method, that's fantastic. So I drove there. I walked across the bridge a couple of times and then had the thought, look, you're here now. Just do it. And so I walked to the middle of the bridge and I took off my shoes. I dropped my bag and I climbed over the fence and fell to the river below. That's a really big thing for people to hear.
Yeah. And fortunately for you, there was a boat in the river that day, wasn't there?
So fortunate, Kerry, yes. I later learned that there was announcement made through the river radio control that somebody had jumped and asking captains, crews to keep an eye out. And they had thought it would be for a body. But yeah, thankfully I was floating in the river and a City Cat crew actually thought that it was a log and decided to go and investigate. And so I truly owe my life. Very lucky. And I later heard that they pulled me into the City Cat and I was apparently awake, but I don't have any recollection of this time whatsoever. And when we filmed A Straight Story, we went back to the location and I thought perhaps it would come back to me, but it didn't.
Which is typical with traumatic events, isn't it?
Yeah, the brain's an incredible machine, right?
Yeah.
It's buried deep in there and inaccessible, at least has been so far. So
Thank you for sharing that, Donna. I'm sure it's not easy going back to that day. And it's a very sensitive story, and so I really appreciate you going back there again for our listeners. But there's such a story of hope to come out of this. Did you get to meet your rescuers?
I did actually, Kerry. When we filmed Australian Story, they tracked down the crew and
Oh, wow.
they're amazing. You could not ask for better rescuers. They were just the loveliest gentlemen. I'm so grateful to them because life is great. And, if they hadn't rescued me, I wouldn't be here to experience that. And I'm not suggesting for a moment that every day is a fantastic day, but so much great stuff has happened in my life since.
You're really here for a great purpose. And I mean, I know firsthand, having worked with you for so long now and even doing my mental health first aid training underneath your guidance and then loving it so much, going on to become a mental health first aid trainer. I just know so many people whose lives you have impacted through being so open, sharing your story. And, the work that you've gone on to do. And, it's like an army of hope, isn't it? And the ripples, you can never discount how many ripples are going to go out to touch so many people's lives. And that's what you've gone on to do, Donna.
Thanks, Kerry. And we need an army.
Yeah.
No one's immune to this. I truly believe that. You never know what perfect storm can arise that could take you to that place. And I hope for all your listeners, they never find themselves in that situation, but it is not that rare. And we need to equip people to know what to do if they ever find themselves in that situation, because I absolutely know that suicide is not the answer. That it is a permanent solution to what's usually a temporary problem. And we have to help people to understand the importance of hanging in there during that danger period,
Yes.
and also equipping everybody so that if it happens to someone they care about, they're able to provide that support.
And that's so true. And in our mental health first aid training as trainers, Donna, something that we really talk about a lot is the amount of people who are impacted by poor mental health today.
Yeah.
Really around 1 in 4 and 1 in 2 people know someone that is struggling with their mental health. So creating awareness about this and about the signs and about what can be done when to help somebody when they are struggling is just really vital to create such a healthy community. So can you tell us about the support that you went on to find after you were rescued that day, and how did that come about? Did you reach out for that yourself, or did somebody that cared about you seek help on your behalf, or how did it come to pass?
Sure. So I think that there are even more and better supports available now, which is so necessary, and it's so needed and so important. So it's great to know that. For me, I spent a little bit of time in a mental health unit. I went there seeking answers. I didn't find a lot of answers. I felt
Okay.
really that they were keeping you safe while you were there, whereas I had hoped I could understand more about how I'd ended up in that situation. Something that was great from that experience, though, was they had a psychiatry registrar working there who needed to do a unit in psychotherapy, and she needed a patient to work with. And
Oh,
they could
wow.
see, yeah, they could see that I was interested in recovery and engaging with support. And they expressed to me that I would need to do 50 hours of therapy with this registrar. And if I pulled out at 49 hours, she would need to start again with a new patient. So
50 hours. When you heard that, was that actually disillusioning to you or encouraging, thinking that you needed 50 hours of support to get well?
I don't think they were suggesting I needed 50 hours to actually do this unit, this psychotherapy unit, to pass it. She needed to have that experience. In a way, it was an opportunity because it was free. I didn't have to pay for it. It was weekly psychotherapy sessions, but it was also a very significant commitment. I couldn't just pull out if I felt like doing that, or if I felt like we'd achieved what I needed to achieve. And so it was made very clear to me that it was a commitment, and I was prepared to take that on. I knew that I wanted to get well, and I wanted to reduce the chance that I could ever find myself in that situation again.
Absolutely. And really it's a case of doing it whatever it takes to get well, isn't it?
Yeah. And I had a private psychiatrist who I had worked with previously, and he and I worked together a little bit directly after the event to consider my future, whether I would stay with the organization, what that might all look like. So, yeah, I basically had some sessions with him and then this year of psychotherapy.
Donna, was there any significant self-defeating core beliefs that came out in those sessions, which you now think might have risen to the surface after the conflict at work?
Oh, there was a lot of limiting self-beliefs, Kerry, and it's still something I can battle with from time to time.
As we all can.
Yeah. despite having done lots of work, it can still come up for me when I'm tested. Key beliefs were just that I'm not good enough.
Okay.
That one runs really deeply for me. I also, at the time that my crisis happened, I had established that my values were my integrity, my tenacity, and my vitality. And at the time that the unraveling was occurring, I felt like none of them were actually in play anymore. I felt like if I don't have these things, if I don't have tenacity, because here I am ready to give up, if I don't have my vitality, because, clearly I'm really struggling right now, and then my integrity, it's like I should be at work and I'm not because I don't want to be there. And I was really questioning, if I'm not that person, who am I? Because that's who I thought I was.
Wow. Yeah. So the foundations were really shaken.
Absolutely. They were crumbling. Something I realized in therapy is that a deviation from our values or being out of alignment with our values doesn't mean they're not still our values, that we can't still aspire to those things.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's such a great perception, Donna.
That was a really key insight that I took away from those sessions, that, our actions are behaviors. And, I'm not, I love how Brene Brown differentiates guilt and shame. And it's like guilt is I did a bad thing. Shame is I'm a bad person. And for me, I think my natural default is to go to shame. Like, I've messed this up. I'm a bad person. I'm useless. Like, over identifying with what was going on. And to be aware of that, I think, is really helpful. We can forgive ourselves if we're not actually feeling like we're flawed. And something I've said to lots of people is that nothing good ever comes from giving ourselves a hard time.
Yeah, true.
It's completely unhelpful, and it restricts our ability to move to a more functional and resourceful state.
Yeah, and that's so profound. And I really totally agree with that on guilt and shame. I have so many clients who have done things that they really regret and they feel so much shame because of that. And they do tell themselves that story. That must mean I'm a bad person. So that's a really, really great to get that message out there to differentiate between the difference between guilt and shame.
Yeah. And I think every single one of us has something in our history or multiple things that we're not proud of. And that's okay. I truly believe that we're just perfectly imperfect.
Well, we're all human, aren't we? we all make mistakes. We all do things we regret. We all stuff up, but it's about how we bounce back from that and what are the tools that we use to do that.
Yes. And how do we learn from it, for sure? We don't want to make the same mistake over and over and over again. We don't want to hurt other people in the process. But we also need to be kind to ourselves and forgive ourselves for those times when we haven't made a choice that we're proud of.
As you hear this story, what Kerry's discussing might be resonating strongly with you. Perhaps you've experienced something similar yourself and are looking for support. Kerry Atherton is an experienced counsellor and wellbeing coach and has private sessions available if you or someone you know needs some help. You don't have to deal with trauma, addiction, PTSD, and abuse alone. If you'd like to talk about today's episode or your own experiences, book a session with Kerry at empowerlifesolutions.com.au or check the link in the show notes and embrace a future filled with hope. Now back to the episode.
Donna, what's some of the things that you do today and put in place to look after yourself, for self-care and to practice kindness towards yourself? Maybe when some of those old self-defeating beliefs or those dark thoughts start to appear, what do you put in practice to combat that?
I have a huge toolkit nowadays, Kerry.
Right.
Some of the key practices, like the everyday ones for me, are my gratitude practice. It's now been going over 8 years. It's a long time. What it looks like is me and at the moment 3 other people text 3 things that we're grateful for every day.
Oh,
I love this practice because I think it's like a mega dose of gratitude. Not only are you aware of what's great in your own life, but you actually experience the joy of others. Witnessing other people's lives is the greatest privilege. It's amazing. And so you actually get to vicariously live their joy. And we hear a lot about vicarious trauma. We don't hear a lot about vicarious joy. And I think it's a thing.
oh, yeah, I love that. I love that. I'm going to think about that more. And yeah, that's
Mm.
great.
Yeah, I first came across it from this woman, Pam Grout. She wrote a book called Thank and Grow Rich. And what we do is text the gratitudes. I usually do it in the morning for the day before or sometimes that evening. What I really love about it is you get a reminder. So sometimes I'm not the first to send the gratitudes. I'll see someone else's pop in. You also have accountability. They're expecting to receive your gratitude.
I was just thinking that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. And then, as I said, there's that vicarious joy as well.
What else is in your toolkit other than that amazing thing right there?
I'm a cyclist and I'm a big fan of doing your thing. I would ride my bike even if it wasn't good for me because it makes me so happy.
Oh, that's great.
I love it being out in the fresh air, usually, depending what road you're riding on. But out in the elements and chatting away to somebody next to you, that is totally my happy place. And I prioritize that. Usually I get to spin my legs 3 times a week. I also subscribe to the idea of helping other people. There's this beautiful concept, hope, help one person every day.
Yes, and I've heard you say that before.
And when we do that, when we help somebody else, we get a lot of happy chemicals in our brain: dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin. So we're actually getting a gift out of it. And I often in my talks will say to people, put your hand up if you're really good at helping other people. And so many hands go up. And then I ask them to keep them up if they're good at asking for help. And so many hands go down.
Yeah.
I challenge them to change their perspective on asking for help because how do you feel when someone asks you for help, Kerry?
I actually love it because I like helping people. It's something that really brings me alive. And it's almost like that person trusts you.
Bingo.
Yeah. And that really makes you feel good about yourself that somebody trusts you enough to ask you for that help.
Absolutely. It gives us a warm and fuzzy feeling because they trust us. And the fact that they get those happy chemicals when they help us, if we don't ask for help, we're depriving them of that, right?
So true.
So I think it is important to shift our perspective. I have got quite good at asking for help. I try not to over rely on people, but I know that I need to ask for help sometimes for life to work. And I'm very comfortable doing that nowadays. I'm not sure if I always was, but I'm all about encouraging people to get comfortable with it. And I love helping others too. It's definitely not a one-way street.
Well, we were born for connection, weren't we?
Absolutely.
And I really feel that connection is vital for the human soul to flourish. And in a society where there is so much disconnection and even a sense of a spirit of aggression rising, connection with positive, like-minded people is needed now more than ever before. Intentional connection.
Intentional connection. Agree wholeheartedly, Kerry. And I would say that's one of my strategies as well, making sure that I'm connecting with people socially. I love people, and it's really important to me to engage with people. Being part of something is really important. I've been in a cycling group for the past 8 years. I love hanging out with other people, friends. I know it brings me joy. I know it fills my cup.
Donna, so your son is how old now?
In May 2026, he will be 16.
Wow. So you've parented him through the social media age.
Oh, yes.
And there's so much talk going on at the moment. Many people are talking about the manosphere with documentary with Louis Theroux.
Heard about that recently. I haven't watched it. It's on my list.
I've watched it. I know I had actually seen a documentary 2 years ago by someone in the UK, so it wasn't a surprise to me. It still was very shocking to see just what a foothold these influencers are having on millions of young lives. So as somebody that works in the mental health space as you do, what do you tell other parents about how to have conversations about mental health with their teenagers?
Mm. Do you know, to be honest, I wouldn't say that I have a lot of those conversations with parents. I certainly have them with adults, usually to other adults, but some of those people would be parents as well.
Yeah.
As a parent myself, I'm working really hard on communicating with my son and normalizing the topic of mental health and mental ill health. But I must admit, my son's a teenager and he's not always open at the moment. And so I try and do things like pick the right time,
Right. Yeah.
speak to him in the car when we're not sitting across from each other. And so it's less formal. He's more relaxed. And that's assuming I can get him off the phone.
Oh, yeah. Right. True.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we try to be as open as possible. He knows my story. He knows that mental illness is a serious issue and that it can have fatal consequences. But I think lots of parents of teenagers can find this really challenging because they're at a stage where they're pulling away from us a bit and they tend to think that they know a lot more than they actually know.
Yeah.
So I think it's quite tricky. But what I would say to any parents out there is look out for the signs of your child withdrawing, isolating, changes to their appetite or their sleep, and really try and keep the communication open. Changes to their interests or habits, changes to their friendship group, those sort of things can be a bit of a warning sign. One of the very best communication tools I've come across, Kerry, and you probably know it through mental health first aid, is those I statements. Using I statements in our communication, I just love that as a technique. You know, I'm worried, I'm concerned, what I'm experiencing is, rather than you this, you know, you're making bad choices, you're aggressive, you're not doing anything. When we use that language, people will often get defensive and they won't hear anything beyond the you. Whereas using those I statements, we're owning what we're experiencing. It doesn't guarantee that they will listen or take other action, but they're less likely to get defensive about it, I would say.
I love that. That's really great information, Donna. And I wasn't going to raise that today, but I just going with the flow. I felt that it was something that might really help. I remember a time when my son was probably around 15 and I actually changed schools for him because he was in not a great crowd and I thought that it would be better to put him in a different school. And within a very short period of time, I noticed a dramatic difference in his attitude and behaviour. And it just almost happened like that. I'd been very, very busy with work projects and everything. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, shivers, something's not right. And something that we had always done prior to me getting busy was going to Gloria Jean's once a week. And his favourite thing was having a chocolate chiller. And he's a real quality time person. And I thought, I've got to get him to Gloria Jean's ASAP. And I always talk about the 5 love languages. If we can be tapped into at least one of their top 2 love languages, they will feel connected enough then to keep that channel of communication open. And after doing that and having a couple more catch-ups, he really opened up to me about what he was struggling with. And then I could take action and we ended up moving him to a different school. And I had had the old boy back. So the happier version.
Yeah, I love that you had this ritual that was a connective experience for you both. That's fantastic. I often feel a little saddened that my son and I used to read a lot. He has dyslexia, so reading is challenging for him, but he loved to be read to. Then later that morphed into storytelling, just random stories, most often true, occasionally made up. And I miss those days.
Yeah.
Teenager, he's not so inclined to want to do that anymore.
Yeah. Now you can send him a long text message. And he'll read
I
that.
may not read. Yes.
Oh,
Wow.
another great, that's a conversation that we could have like a whole few hours on, isn't it? Maybe another time we will.
Yeah.
Donna, what do you think the biggest myth out there is about mental health?
The biggest myth. I think there's a big myth that, mental illness happens to other people. I think that it's something, as I said earlier, that any of us can experience in a particular stage of life or circumstance. And I think we all need to be aware of that risk and know what to do should it occur. I think you would know this too. One of the other big myths is that more men attempt suicide than women,
Yeah.
that it's because men don't talk. I hear that a lot.
Yeah.
What we know is that more men die by suicide, but more women actually attempt suicide. I think that's an important piece of information to get out there because women are at risk. And in fact, they experience most of the mental illnesses at higher rates than men do.
Very good point. And when we do our training too, we do talk about the statistics have shown that more women struggle with anxiety.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a very good point to bring out. Donna, do you want to just quickly explain to everyone that's listening about the mental health continuum? Because that's something that's really beneficial to hear about because there's a real positive side to that as well.
Yeah. The mental health continuum is, as a continuum is, a line with an arrow on each end, and all of us have mental health. Every single one of us sits somewhere on that line. And let's imagine red shading at one end, so the left end of the arrow, orange in the middle, and then green on the right-hand side. Now, what we know is that lots of people sit in the middle in the orange zone, and research from the field of positive psychology has shown that in that zone, we're more likely to be just going, doing, sort of almost like on the hamster wheel, and we're not taking enough time for rest and relaxation, and we're probably not sleeping well. The demands of our environment often feel a stretch for our capacity. And I'm an advocate for spending as much time as possible in the green zone.
Yeah.
Because when we're in the green zone and we encounter one of life's curveballs, we're likely to slip back into the orange zone if we start to struggle. But if we're hanging out most of our days in the orange zone and we get that curveball, it can put us back into the red zone. And that's where we're more likely to struggle and at greater risk of experiencing a mental health condition. So, yeah, we won't spend every day in the green zone, but I do think that it's something for us to aspire to. And we do that by having good self-care practices, good resilience strategies. We've spoken about a few today.
Yeah.
Things like breathing, having a breathwork practice. And it doesn't have to be really sophisticated either. It can be as simple as box breathing. Some of your listeners may have heard of that, where we, using a count of 4, 5, or 6, we breathe in for that count. So breathe in for 4, hold for 4, breathe out for 4, hold for 4, breathe in for 4, and continue that cycle. that is something really simple that we can do, and it can help us in the moment, but it can also help us ongoing with our resilience. And then we've got one of my favorites is a physiological sigh, which has apparently been around since the 30s. I heard about it on Andrew Huberman's podcast, the Huberman Lab. And it is so simple, but apparently has been proven to calm our nervous system down. And what it looks like is just 2 quick breaths in succession and then a sigh. So it's
You just made me want to sigh then. I know, I've heard that recently. So I've been practicing sighing out loud in the shower and stuff.
It's great. And some of us do it intuitively. I know when I told my friend, come business partner about it, she was like, oh my gosh, I sigh all the time.
Right.
And once I was running a resilience workshop and they were working in groups. And when I talked about it, this bunch of people just started laughing. And I was like, what's going on? And they said, oh, Roger does that all the time. And we always have a go at him because he always sighs. And my dog does it.
Oh,
I think we can learn a lot from animals. You know, my dog, every time she gets up, she does a downward dog and she shakes it all out and she sighs all the time.
And all that stuff that you've talked about, the breathing, the sighing, what that also does is brings us back to the present.
Absolutely.
Where we're not living in the fear of tomorrow, the uncertainty or the regret of the past. We're living right now in the here and now. And that is just so important for keeping mental health positive. Donna, it's been such a wonderful conversation today. I'll ask you our last question, which is a big one. It's, what is your message for the world?
I feel like I've already said this, Kerry, but this just feels so important. And it's that everything is temporary. Everything, the good and the bad. And if we're ever struggling, we need to remember that it won't always be this way.
Thank you, Donna. What an amazing message of hope and a wonderful story of hope you are, and such an inspiration to everyone that you know and that meets you and will listen today. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Kerry. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to Stories of Hope with Kerry Atherton. If this conversation helped you, please consider sharing the podcast with a friend or leaving a rating and review on your podcast player. If you'd like to find out more about Kerry Atherton, head to storiesofhope.com.au, where you can purchase her books or find her next event. Check the show notes for links and information about our guest in this episode. And remember, you don't have to walk your path alone.